Every leader has a strategy. Executing on that strategy is the challenge. If you want to learn how to effectively achieve what you've set out to accomplish, then this show is for you. Gain keen insights and listen in as leaders share their stories and challenges. SOAR Vision Group and the Baldrige Foundation welcome you to Leader Dialogue Radio.
This is Duffy Dixon with Business Radio X. Thanks for joining us. Let me introduce our two hosts with the SOAR Vision Group. Ben Sawyer is the Chief Executive Officer. Ben has more than 30 years of executive leadership experience and a strong record of accomplishment. He has significant guided strategy deployment experience. He's a lean black belt. That's the Six Sigma black belt. He's worked with many clients to achieve dramatic and sustainable operational performance. Jennifer Strahan is president of Business Optimization Services for SOAR Vision Group. Jennifer has partnered with more than 100 health systems and businesses across the U.S., helping them transform their strategic, administrative, and clinical operations. She herself has a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt. Welcome to you, and we have a new guest, someone you're working with. This is exciting.
Yes, thank you, Duffy.
Joining us is Alive Studios, Cynthia Kay, the CEO, and L.A. Ricketson, the Chief Marketing Officer of Alive Studios. So for our listeners, tell us about Alive Studios.
Wow, we're going to jump right into it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, yes, I am Cynthia. I'm not only the CEO, but I proudly call myself the Chief Zookeeper because we have these 26 augmented reality animals that teach kids how to read. And yes, how in the world did we get started? Why is Alive Studios even here? We're just over 4 years old. And I have 4 kids. My husband and I, we birthed our 2 girls, but we thought it would be a great idea to adopt 2 boys from an orphanage out of Latvia, which was former Soviet Union. They were like 5 or 6. So we brought them over to the United States, here to Atlanta, Georgia. And teaching them to speak English wasn't too bad, but teaching them to read English was quite a challenge. And I had them in public school, private school. We did a lot of tutoring, and really nothing was working. So I'm getting really worried because they're getting older and older now. They're like, 11 and 10, and we all know if our kids are not reading, they have behavioral issues, and it's a real challenge. So I'm worried. So what happened is, I had another company called Logical Choice at the time, and I said, guys, what can we do to get my kids reading? I tried everything, and nothing was working. Nothing would engage them. As a matter of fact, when I was trying to help them, because I figured I have an elementary ed degree, how hard can this be? So I brought him in my office. I had an interactive whiteboard. I did hooked on phonics, but we started crying. By now he's like 11, and I thought, oh dear God, what are we going to do to get my boys engaged in reading? And I found out it wasn't just a personal problem, but this is actually a national crisis. I don't know if our listeners know.
So
right?
that's a great point, Cynthia. So let me just take a second.
Yes.
And bring the listeners up to speed on how big the literacy problem is. So right now, 1 of every 10 students in the United States are English language learners. Mm-hmm. And by 2025, they estimate that will be 1 of every 4. 76% of elementary school and 56% of secondary school English language learners are native born. Mm-hmm. So this isn't just an immigrant issue. And more than half in public secondary schools are second or third generation U.S. citizens.
Right.
By age 3, there is a 30 million word gap between children from the wealthiest and poorest communities and family just because of exposure and not being able to be read to and so on. At least 30% of children enter kindergarten without the essential pre-literacy skills needed for kindergarten readiness and success, and about 67% nationwide, and more than 80% of those from low-income families are not proficient readers by the end of the 3rd grade. So you would think, well, it sounds like it's a kid issue. It's pre-K and maybe elementary school, but turns out that's not the case. 1 in 7 adults can only read at an elementary level.
Right.
And lack basic literacy skills for work and life tasks. Over 60% of adults in the prison system read at or below the 4th grade level. 43% of adults in the lowest literacy levels live below the poverty line. 66% of students who cannot read proficiently by 4th grade will end up in jail or on welfare. And this is the last one.
Yeah.
So
75% of Fortune 500 companies spend resources on remedial training for the
Right.
workers. So it's a big issue.
that's a lot of statistics to throw out
Yeah.
to listeners. So what I'm thinking about is one of the things that was the most intriguing for me when I started to learn about this was you guys talked about the pathway to prison. And what does this mean for not just students in school, but the broader community? Can you talk just a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this is a really disturbing crisis. So there are at least 2 states in the union that determine how many prison cells they need to build based on 3rd grade reading scores. And the reason is because if a child cannot read by 3rd grade, they sometimes will not even make it past middle school, 5th or 6th grade. They drop out.
Absolutely.
Now they're illiterate. They can't read to fill out job applications, and they go in the wrong direction,
Right.
and they end up in prison.
Yeah,
So it's called pathway to prison.
If you're not reading by 3rd grade, the kids have a confidence issue, and they start acting out, and they choose other avenues for acceptance, which we all know is not good. But just for our listening audience, there's a thing called the Nation's Report Card. So they do a national test for all of our 4th graders and all of our 8th graders, and this is what we use. And just what you were saying, Ben, when they take this test, only 36% of those kids are proficient in reading. Only 36%. So my boys were right in that category. So it's a real challenge. And it doesn't get better at 8th grade, same scores.
And also, you know, people who maybe English is not their first language, they may speak English perfectly
Right.
fine, and they speak it at school, but they get home at night and they have family members who don't speak English. So the idea that they're going to learn all of their reading at school and they're going to practice their reading at school is just not. That's not accurate. I mean,
That's
they're
correct.
no one reads to them at home.
right.
I've
That's right.
tutored kids,
Yes.
and that's not something that happens in their home. And like it or not, that is the reality. And you
Right.
can't expect. If
Right.
you remember being in school, if you're not the best reader, you're
Yeah.
slowing the class
Yeah.
Oh
down.
my gosh.
You feel that.
Right.
You're right,
Right.
lack of confidence. And once you have that, undoing that, you have to do that early on.
Right.
That's right.
So I was a really worried mom, right? Because this is exactly what I know is going to happen. And when I rolled it out, the problem to my executive team at my old company, I told them about it, and I said, "You guys have any ideas? We're a tech company. Have any ideas how we can make this engaging?" It was crickets. For months, nobody had a clue, and I just worried about it. But one day, I had a young customer care guy, had long, red hair, and he's like, "Cynthia, I want to show you something really cool." So I'm like, "All right." So back in the back of the corner of the office, he's got a document camera and a white piece of paper hooked up to a computer, and it had a black square on it. So he slid it under the document camera, and the Eiffel Tower popped up in 3D on the computer. I'm like, "What is that?" He goes, "Oh, it's called augmented reality," which sounded like he was on drugs. Maybe there was some of that.
You're doing a great impression,
But,
by the way.
thank you. Yeah, I surround myself with crazy young people. But when I saw it, I thought, gosh, that is so engaging. I wonder if we could have like animals pop up in augmented reality. Now, this was 8 years ago. Augmented reality, nobody heard of it. It's at 3D without glasses. Apple's getting into it now. So when I saw that, I said, you know what, let's put money aside. I don't know what we're doing, but let's put money aside. I'm going to build a team, bring in reading specialists and engineers and programmers and animators, and we started doing what we call Letters Alive. And we started with Gertie Giraffe because she's tall, like the Eiffel Tower.
Perfect.
Of course, it was over budget, took us over 2 years, but that's how our first program was born. And I fell in love with it so much that I sold that company and started Alive Studios just 4 years ago, just to equip teachers and schools throughout the country with this software to help get our kids reading by 3rd grade.
So tell me, for the kids, what this looks like.
Yeah. So it's called Letters Alive, or Learning Alive if you want the math component. And it's a kit that goes to the teacher in the classroom. So it's got manipulatives, it's got the software, and it's to teach whole class. So she's introducing, Amos alligator, and the alligator pops out if you have them on a big interactive whiteboard, teaches the letter A, we build sentences, the animals interact with the sentences, and the kids are engaged for like 20, they can't even go to recess. They're so excited. They go, "Okay, kids, it's time for recess." "Oh, can't we do another letter?"
Wow.
Who
Duffy,
does that?
So Jennifer and I saw the demo of this. It's amazing. I mean, it just jumps out at you. It grabs your attention. You can't not pay attention. And for children, of course, They love this stuff.
Yeah.
Right. So my first question was, is this only for teachers in classrooms, or do we get it as parents too? Right.
Yeah.
And that's been an exciting.
Yeah, so we have something for parents called our journal, Letters Alive journals, which are so much, less expensive, whereas the classroom kit, it's a 1-year curriculum for the teachers. So, but yeah, we're so passionate about getting this, awareness that we have this to help solve. We're not the only cure, but we definitely have something that's making a difference. And we're trying to get it with pre-K and kindergarten, win it there. So it's really just intervention for those first, second, and third graders. But our goal is to get this really into every classroom in America to help the kids.
So, LA, you're involved in making sure that the market is aware of this and adoption. So tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely, yeah. Cynthia and I go way back. We come from the same church. We've been friends for a while. So I helped her with marketing with her previous company, kind of, night shift thing. But then when she spun off Alive Studios, we met at Starbucks. I looked at it and I thought, man, this is really cool, but not quite yet. Had to wait till our stars aligned a few months later. And then when it did, I jumped on board. So yeah, I'm just a professional storyteller, helping her with her ideas and brilliance to be able to put that together in the form of a message and to deliver that to people.
So talk about your message, because you guys, I think what's so unique about you is your creativity behind the animals and the zookeepers. And can you talk a little bit about how that came to be and how that really engages the audience, both teachers and students? Because teachers matters too, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
That engagement.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And as we go around the country, going to trade shows, and we're in front of teachers several occasions, educators around the country.
Right.
One of the biggest pain points is engagement.
Right.
The students are not engaged. I'm losing them. They're bored out of their mind. They come into the classroom. What do I have? Teaching tools to keep the attention. So that goes hand in hand with the animals being in 3D, popping off the screen, and the kids just come unglued. I mean, they're just totally like they're at Six Flags or something. They absolutely love it. And then that kind of has a cross-curricular appeal to it, because they're learning about animals at the same time they're learning about letters and reading and the building blocks of the English language.
Right.
So that ties in a little bit of science, which makes it cross-curricular, and just one of the many, many, many things that make us a disruptor in the culture of education.
So we had the opportunity to meet with you at a Part 1 discovery process, and you shared with us your big, hairy, audacious goal.
Yes. I know it sounds,
which is a BHAG. I think that comes from Jim Collins' book.
It does.
Yeah, so tell us about that.
The big, hairy, audacious goal, our BHAG, and that is to help shift the nation's report card, which is only 36% of our kids reading proficiently. We want to shift it to over 70%. We know that it's going to take the communities all over the place, businesses, to make this shift happen, but I'm totally committed to it. We have a business, right? But I really see this as a calling, is really my first. Yeah, I would love to be a $100 million company, but it's really all secondary.
Right.
I really want to see these kids. To see that shift, wow. I mean, that would be awesome.
Right.
And we need everybody to join us. A cool news story that just happened, the Gwinnett Library System, they saw our product about a year ago and said, oh my gosh, we really want this in every branch in Gwinnett County. They have 15 branches, but they didn't have the funding. And so the Community Foundation for Northeast Georgia and the Atlanta Retailers Association donated the money to get a kit in every one. So this summer, it's happening. We're rolling it out, and they're going to be doing summer camps and, Letters Alive camps.
Exciting.
Yeah. So they're the first library system in the country to do a rollout.
Right.
So
your primary target customer is schools.
Yes.
But it sounds like you also go into libraries. And what other kinds of clients do you sell to?
Yes, predominantly public and private schools, the elementary, so pre-K, in kindergarten, a Head Start, private schools, daycare.
Yeah, learning centers.
Learning centers is really
And do you ever
smart.
get a family that wants to buy one?
Well, the consumers, she was alluding to our Letters Alive journal earlier, which is the take-home because it has a free app on your mobile phone. Everybody has a mobile phone, right? So it's a free app that makes that book come alive. In the book, in that journal, are all 26 letters, all 26 animals. You just learn the building blocks of letters, letter naming, letter sounds throughout that book. So it's a fantastic consumer product.
Right.
Yeah, but the kit has got everything in it to learn reading, because it's $1,500 kit, but it's a one-time purchase for the schools for the classroom. So it's really quite a deal for schools, but it might be a little pricey for parents.
So Jennifer, we in part 1 started the discovery process. Can you explain to the listeners kind of what that entails?
Sure.
And then we can describe a little bit of what part 2 is and have that discussion.
Right. So just as a reminder, we talked a little bit about this a couple weeks ago when we had Swim Kids of Georgia in as well. And essentially your discovery process is just an opportunity to come in with an objective set of fresh eyes and say, hey, tell us your story, similar to what you guys are doing. But of course, we got to see a demo and really dive into the content in a little bit more detail. And we're looking at it based on the organizational hierarchy of needs. And so from that, we're looking at what's our strategic deployment, what's your financial performance, where's the customer value, your organizational effectiveness, and then of course your employee or workforce engagement as well.
So for our listeners, this is a good point. If you are listening and want to follow along, if you have your computer, you want to go to www.leaderdialogue.com, and there you're going to see that hierarchy of needs. And when we talk about this, you can easily follow along. You can also click on any of those boxes and it'll take you in further to talk about what they're just going to tap into on this show. Again, that's www.leaderdialogue.com. So continue.
So thinking about actually your BHAG or your big, hairy, audacious goal of changing that 36% to 70%, that's a key component of tapping into demand, right? So talk to us a little bit about kind of what's your vision. How do you get there?
Yeah, so we have a couple of really large national partners, Kaplan Early Learning and Follett School Solutions. So we have their national players that, they have relationships with these schools, so it's very easy for them to bring them in. We have a few independent sales agents. We have a PR firm that works just for the school market. But we want to do more. What other things can we do? And that's what we dialogue as a team to get our messaging out, because people just don't know that we exist. But once they do, they love it, and it's solving a problem. So that's kind of our biggest challenge right now.
And the education environment is not an easy environment to sell into.
Right.
So talk to us a little bit about that, because tap into demand is not just show them your product and they buy.
Right, and we could show them the product and they love it, and then, boy, we wish we had some funds, right?
Okay, so funding.
So you might show it to them and go over it with them, but it might be 12 months later they call, we finally got the funding. I've had one that was 4 years old that called me. They said, we saw it, remember? I'm like, oh gosh, we were at that show? Yeah, 4 years ago. We just got it. I'm like, oh, wow. That's unusual, but it's not unusual that it takes a while for the schools to get the funding.
So LA, what are some other things that you encounter in terms of tapping into demand in terms of your product?
Well, we kind of take a strategy of top down, bottom up. Because you can't have district administrators seeing a brilliant idea and then they push it to the teachers without teacher buy-in.
Right.
You can't show it to a teacher and get the buy-in and expect them to have the funds to be able to make the decision.
Right.
So our whole strategy with trade shows and going around, being the evangelist of the product, is that top down, bottom up. We have to do both. We have to get teachers excited about what's happening in the classroom and the tools that we give them to engage the kids. But then also you've got to have the money buy-in and the technology buy-in, and it fits what their goals are for within their district to be able to change the numbers. It all falls back to changing the numbers and getting funding. Everything hinges on that. And then you've got your retention rates and all this, where they got the holdback and the advancement and whatnot of the children. So they're all spreadsheet based, where they're looking at goals and numbers, and this helps that. So it's that package of the message.
So SOAR has worked with other education companies, and we've learned through that process how involved the buying process is. Because, for example, for the listeners, there is this thing called ESSA, which is Every Student Succeeds Act, that was passed in 2015, that became a requirement in 2017. And there are very specific things that your curriculum has to do. Every state, as you know, has particular standards. And you have to meet those by state, right? And then there has to be validated research. There's this thing called What Works Clearinghouse, that if you're in, that's kind of a gold standard for research. So talk to us a little bit about that, because again, it's not just put your product in front of people and wow, and then they buy. It's how does it actually meet these kinds of requirements?
And it's been an evolution. So because we're out, working with teachers and administrators, we're learning what we needed. So we got independent research from West Georgia very early on, which has been huge. So Title I can use funding because of that. We have case studies. The state standards. So we lined a Common Core. Of course, then that's kind of evolved, and then of course Texas has their own. So we had to make sure we lined to that, right? TEEX. So we're always learning and finding out what other things we need to do to enhance and evolve, and we're doing that. And then some of the things that we're working with, meeting with some specialists. Next week with you guys?
Right. So in part 2, we're bringing in some researchers that are specialists in literacy to be able to provide you all some feedback on that. Jennifer, just a quick question. So when you talk about tap into demand and you look in a highly regulated market, how does just an organization in general, Alive Studios in particular, but how do they go about being able to get over those hurdles and really tap into demand?
That's a good question. There's several pieces to it, right? So one is understanding what is it that your customers need. What's their value that you're offering to your customer? What differentiates you guys? We talked a lot about differentiation over the last few weeks, and what differentiates you in the market of other supplemental curriculums that support literacy. The second thing is making sure your customers actually know they need you, right? So because it is oftentimes in a lot of businesses, it can be a saturated market. So it's hard to filter through the noise and see what's the most important. So you have to be able to have both the idea of what do we need to offer? Do they know that they need this? And how do we actually make that connection and show that we're creating value for them with that? And then, of course, all of that does nothing without funding, which brings up a really good point, because you've talked a lot about like Title I, different funds. So whether you're in the education vertical or domain or not, a lot of businesses deal with some type of funding or third party or regulations, and that's a whole nother hurdle from a business perspective, because you're not only trying to meet their value, but you have to do it in a way that it's just extra hoops to jump through. So you've got to make sure you're doing it effectively and in a way that you can still afford to provide that value, right?
Definitely.
So we talked in part 1 about this thing called a Kano model. Remember, we looked at what are the must-haves that you just have to be in the market. And then the listeners can look on the Leader Dialogue site and see that. If they click on the box, tap into demand, it'll take them to the blog that talks about this Kano model. They can see what I'm talking about. And then the next line is the differentiator. They do must-haves better, and they differentiate themselves. But there's this other curve, which is the delighter. And remember, we talked about Apple. So they're an iPod manufacturer, so is Dell, so is HP. But it wasn't just the cool white packaged iPod. What was it that really was a delighter for the market?
iTunes.
Yeah, that was the connection. So in your space, as you think about the market and tapping into demand, and you look at these entry-level requirements of regulation and research and so forth, how do you go on beyond that and actually hit the delighter level?
Yeah, great question. So, you know how we all love to go to Disney? I don't care if you're an adult or a kid. We love going to Disney, and my kids were, obsessed with it. And I thought, why can't classrooms be that way? Why can't we bring a Disney-like experience with characters they love that just teach them about reading and math? Why can't that be fun? Well, it can be. And so augmented reality, right, these 3D animals come to life in the classroom. We haven't even rolled it out, a little sneak peek. We've got alphabet carpets are going to come alive with our free app. You'll scan the classroom carpet, and the music video of the animals singing the ABC song is going to happen.
Nice.
It's just another element in the classroom. Why not? Right. If you're going to have a carpet, you might as well have it come alive. Why not?
Right.
So, and then we'll have them in your houses, right? So yeah, we're bringing that experience, and we're using about 6 to 7 different learning modalities, right? So you're seeing, you're hearing, you're touching. Kids, I have to learn visually, or I got to be fiddling with something. We bring that to the classroom, and the teachers have fun, right? The teachers need to have fun too.
You're also meeting kids where they're at. Like it or not, our kids have technology,
right?
Yep.
And they watch technology, and they are a part of technology, and there are characters they can interact with in their video games. They can make up entire stories and choose the outcomes of things. It seems to me that we have to start meeting kids where they're at, what engages them, and make education part of that.
Yeah, no, you bring
it's
up
just
a great
silly
point.
that they don't, where are they spending their time? things that are interactive and engaging.
And you know what's different about that? I'm glad you brought that up, because I know some folks are like, oh, you know, they get so much technology. But this is different. This is a class by itself, because the teacher actually is facilitating and they're collaborating. So the kids are learning how to, share. You have to see it in action, but it's not this stare and peck thing. You just pull a chair up and they're in the zone by themselves. You're actually interacting with the animals. The kids are like screaming in a good way. And, they're like, all right, Johnny, you get to put the red card up there. And then the animal turns red. So there's a lot of social skills that are happening that you typically don't get in using tech.
Yeah, so I remember in the demo, LA, I can't remember your character's name, was the seal, though?
Sergio.
Yeah, so he got to do a flip for us. I mean, it's a great example of how, you acknowledged a win that a student could have, and that the actual animals come to life with that.
Yeah, it empowers teachers to be able to do that. That's why we call them the zookeepers, because they are the zookeeper of the room, and they're magical in front of the children. It gives a good.
It's a great wow. I mean, I can't tell the audience enough about how fun it is to watch this thing. But let's go back to tap into demand. So that wow factor is a differentiator.
Right.
But when you're talking about particularly large school districts, they have some very, very specific requirements. Like they have a literacy balanced solution that they look at. They have alphabetic principles. They have state standards. And even if you have a wow factor, it's not enough to actually get over those hurdles. So talk to us a little bit about that. We're gonna get into this in a little bit in part two. But what are some of your thoughts in that regard?
Yeah, no. So we've when we first started, we didn't have independent research. Come to find out, you have to have that to sell into a lot of the schools. But that took us 2 years to get, believe it or not. It was a long process.
Right.
We have a 1 year of lesson plans. We had that all written up. That took a long time.
Right.
So as we've been out with talking to educators, they tell us what's important to them. And then we take that and we just try to make it fun, and engaging.
Right.
So yes, and we're continuing that.
So I have two questions or two thoughts. One is, how do you, can you share a little bit about what are some highlights, some successes that some of your clients have seen, some of the schools have seen? And then two is, you're working to hit your big, hairy, audacious goal, and you're trying to jump across a large chasm. What does that look like, right? Like, how do you actually go to the next level? Because a lot of organizations struggle. They grow and they're doing really great, and then they kind of hit a plateau because either resources or time, or there's some demand that's very hard to balance with what you can currently do and what you have to be able to do to get to that next level. So I just kind of want to hear a little bit about maybe that tension, and then I do want to highlight some of the successes.
Yeah,
that you guys
so
have
let me
seen.
jump into the success stories. That one's more fun.
Yeah.
So Philadelphia School District, they saw the product last summer at a show. Actually, they were demoing it, and when they saw it, they couldn't believe it because it looked crazy engaging. And the problem that they were having with these 4-year-olds coming in from the inner city was behavior issue. Nothing was captured. Just crazy little kids. Can you imagine 25 of them coming in from really no instruction to stand in line? Nothing was engaged, much less teach them anything, right? So when they saw it, they go, oh my gosh, this looks like something that the kids would love. Long story short, they put it in every single pre-K classroom. So it was about 140 kits.
That's awesome.
We went there before school in the summer and trained all 200 of the pre-K teachers. That was a riot. And we've been talking to them because it's been a year now, and they said they absolutely love it. The kids' engagement's off the charts. We won't get the results, I think, till October is when the assessments are going to come through, because they've been tracking. But they bought more. I thought you used up all your pre-K. Well, we have some other unique classrooms. We're getting another 30 for them, and that is so rewarding to see these kids love it. And are learning from it, and now they're talking about their kindergarten kids are going to have it, because they're going to like, where's Amos Alligator?
Right.
So
No one wants to go to the next grade without him.
Exactly. We're taking them with us. Okay, what was the second question you had?
Second was just about that tension that you fight to go from where you're currently at to kind of cross the chasm to the next level.
Well, I think, I've had the blessings of starting another company from 0 to 97 million. So I understand all the gaps you've got to go through in changes in leadership or in, growth. But for us right now, the challenge is just the awareness that this can have a positive impact in your schools, and we can ramp up to it pretty quickly. That I have marked out in my head. We know how to ramp up. It's just when all these districts are going to want it at the same time. I welcome that challenge, and I think that's really our biggest one, is just getting people to know where.
Yeah, so one of the things we talked about, and this will be true for a lot of business listeners, is they may have a product that is very cool and it's got a market presence, but there are some things they need to do to it over time that would even expand its reach. And so they have to thoughtfully think about their product development cycle. And they have to sell and position everything they have to be successful. Simultaneously, they're thinking about what they want to be able to do in the future to even expand its reach. You guys have been thinking about that, so talk to us a little bit about that.
Great point. So that reminds me of one of the things I think we do well with the team is how flexible we are and very quick to respond. So we'd be out there training teachers, and lo and behold, teacher goes, Cynthia, why don't, when you put the big card down when you're building a sentence, does the animal not get big or little? I go, oh my gosh, that's a great idea. So we write that down, or they'll bring up other things. I come back to the office, okay, I know we're working on X, stop that for a minute. This will take a week. Of course, it always takes like 4 weeks. But it'll only take like a day, and it never does.
We'll have it done by lunch.
Yeah, a month later.
Optimism, love it.
Yeah, but that we get that out. So we hear, and sometimes you just got to make a change, put some stuff on hold, redo stuff, because the market is needing something else. And so I think that's been a strength of ours. The rugs were not on the thing. Somebody were saying, we need these fun rugs. And so we popped that in.
So let me go ahead.
I was just going to mention that's a great example of going back into tapping into demand, is being able to actively listen to your voice of customer and creating. There's a flexibility there. There's, again, the tension in some regards to where it's how do we make sure we're not getting distracted, but at the same time.
No, you can't do everything that they ask. Okay, I get all kinds of stuff, and not that they're bad ideas.
Sure.
And a lot of them I'll just say, that's a great idea. I'm going to put it on my list.
Right.
And I do have this long list, but we weigh it out. Does this make sense for us to put this on hold, to do this? What kind of return on investment would we get on these dollars? And that's, if it goes through our filter, it gets bumped up. Otherwise, it just stays on the, that'd be awesome to do one day list.
And that's a great discipline, because that's relevant to so many businesses.
So we're almost out of time. So let me see if I can just summarize for the viewers kind of what we've learned today. So Alive Studios was started about 4 years ago because of a personal mission for you with your boys from Latvia. And you developed this very cool augmented reality tool. We saw it in a demo. It is super cool. And if a listener wants to go to your website, what's the website again?
Yeah, so it's AliveStudiosCo.com. Don't forget the co, or you'll end up somewhere else.
Okay. Yeah. And so they can take a look at it, and then what you've learned as you've gone through it is there's an audience for your product, and then you can always refine it and continue to develop it to better and better tap into demand. And you're always looking for delighters.
Absolutely.
Ways that really differentiate you.
What a great show. We learned so much. Thank you so much to Alive Studios. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
We will be following up next week, as you said, talking a little bit more about the research that was done, how that's helped the company. So join us next week. And thank you for joining us. And thank you to the SOAR Vision Group that makes this possible, and the Baldrige Foundation. Now, remember to tune in every Friday at 1 o'clock Eastern Time if you want to listen live to our broadcast, and then to hear this episode again or to listen to any of our previous Leader Dialogue episodes, visit businessradiox.com, select the Gwinnett Studio, then select Leader Dialogue. On behalf of the hosts, Ben Sawyer, Jennifer Strahan with SOAR Vision Group, and our producers, Mike, Trey, and Nat, I'm Duffy Dixon, and we'll see you next time on Leader Dialogue on Business Radio X. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Duffy.
Guys.